A fanboy over here, my fanboys here, the Danettes, have a question. They're allowed to have one question for you, Ron, okay?
There's strict rules around here.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Well, I know these guys color outside the lines, and so that's the problem here.
Okay.
All right, Paulie, I'll start with you. Your question for Ron Howard.
Now, as everyone knows, you directed Nightshift, which is one of the great comedies, probably one of the more underrated comedies of all time. I love that movie.
Thank you.
It was one of Henry Winkler was in Michael Keaton's first roles.
Right.
How much did he ad lib in that movie? And did you see him more going forward as a comedian, comedy actor, or a serious actor? He's done both.
Well, he was a lot. It was very well written by Lowell Gans and Babaloo Mandel, and that was the first time I'd worked with them. And later we did Parenthood and Splash and other movies together. So the character was well written, but Michael absolutely had a green light. So, we'd get a scripted take or two, and he had those improvisational skills were there. And basically it was, here's your take, Michael, or two. And he just could go. And Henry Winkler just loved the whole change of suddenly being kind of the straight man here. And he adored what Michael was doing. But it was explosive. It was crazy. The studio didn't know quite what they were seeing. They were, Brian Grazer, that was Brian Grazer's idea, my partner at Imagine, which is based on a real event. Somebody was running a prostitution ring out of the New York City morgue. Brian discovered this little news clipping, and so it's not a true story. From there, we entirely invented it. But there's New York for you, inspiration for all things.
All right, Seaton.
I'm actually going to do a memory and a question, if you don't mind.
Outside the lines, you said.
Yeah, see, I'm going to break the rules right straight away. I have a pretty vivid memory as a child watching Happy Days with my siblings, and Richie Cunningham calls his father Bucko, and all of us bursting into tears and saying, why would he say that to his daddy? Oh, the Bucko, it's so mean. So I don't know if you were aware of what a crushing moment that scene actually was, but it stuck with me 30 years later.
I would say your family doesn't have much of a sense of humor.
Yeah, I know. Why did he say that to his daddy?
Maybe you were taking Happy Days just a wee bit too seriously, but I'm glad it reached you in that way.
Okay, so that dovetails perfectly into my next point here, in that you taught a very valuable life lesson in Happy Days. That is 72 teeny weeny beers will get you just as hungover as normal sized beers.
Yes.
There were a lot of very powerful life lessons. Were you aware that that was also happening too?
Well, I one would hope. Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you a story about sitcoms. Here's the thing, and one time, 15, 20 years ago, our family. I have 4 kids. We were all somehow it was one of those days where there were issues that were kind of boiling over, resentments about the parents. Cheryl and I were trying to work things out. There was maybe Cheryl and I didn't agree entirely. One of those tense moments. And for some reason, there was a show. I don't even know what sitcom it was, but it was a rerun of like a sitcom from the 80s or the early 90s or something that was on. And it dawned on us that the episode was dealing with our thing. And as sort of broad and zany and bright colored and all of it was, that show, we all stopped and watched it, and it made a difference. And I've always felt like no matter what genre you're working in, there's a lesson in that. It can be a Saturday morning cartoon, it can be a true story brought to the big screen, it can be a broad comedy, it can be a fantasy, but you should work hard at those themes. Stories aren't entertaining, whatever the genre, unless there's an idea behind it. And people work really hard on these shows, all of them. And whoever worked really hard on that episode from that 80s middle-of-the-road sitcom, I was really grateful for that day.
McLovin, we're talking to Ron Howard. The movie is In the Heart of the Sea. You can see it Friday everywhere this December 11th.
Okay, I'm sure you've heard of this before, but Cocoon, 1985. Wilford Brimley, according to my research, is 50 years old. How did that happen? Weren't you worried that he was too young to play one of the old guys in Cocoon?
Well, I met him, and
that's the question you have for
Ron
Howard?
I'm obsessed with this guy.
Well, Wilford is an unbelievably talented guy, great improvisational actor, brilliant. And I met him, and I didn't really know how old he was, but he then said, look, I'm not as old as these other people. I didn't know he was only 50. But let me dye my hair, and let me just come back. And didn't really audition, but he created the look, and he came back with the clothing. and the producers, Richard and Lily Zanuck and David Brown and I just thought he could do it, and he certainly did. And he also, he brought a kind of another level of authenticity or something to that movie that I'll always be really, really grateful for. There's a great scene people like where he and his grandson are fishing, and I always like to give credit to the fact that Wilford said, "Could I improvise this scene?" And even though it's a drama, I said, "Yes, let's try it." And it was one of the really touching scenes that I've ever been involved with.
All right, Fritzy.
What is the most disturbing or awkward thing you witnessed while on the set of Happy Days, and did any romances develop outside of Joni Loves Chachi? And I had a big crush on Pinky Tuscadero. I don't know if that would be one of the people involved.
Yep. Okay. I'm sorry you and Pinky can't find each other. She's really, really terrific. She's got a lot of energy.
Was there inappropriate stuff going on Happy Days?
We were. No, not that I was particularly aware of. It was the 80s, but no, there really wasn't. Look, we were a little bit like, once Henry took off as Fonzie, and that was like a phenomenon. I mean, you just have to. TV was a little different then because there were only the 3 networks. And when the show took off, it was explosive. It would just kind of take over. So he was, it was like Beatlemania. It was like being in a boy band. Suddenly, being on Happy Days was a little bit like being in a boy band. Now, I was dating and about to get married, but the guys had a little fun.
Ralph Mal, I bet Ralph and Donnie Most probably had some fun.
Those guys had fun. And then they found soulmates, and everybody's happily married with the marriages that came while they were doing the show.
Thanks for being a good sport.
Oh, it's fun. It's
We
fun.
appreciate it. The movie is In the Heart of the Sea with Chris Hemsworth. It's based on a true story. The New England fishing vessel, the Essex, and surviving after being attacked by a whale, and it inspired Moby Dick, Herman Melville. McLovin is a huge Moby Dick fan, and so he was like questioning just the authenticity of this. So
Yeah, I said, "Where's Ahab?" And then I realized that wasn't the deal.
People going to see Moby Dick, that's a mislead. But again, I thought this was something kind of original, and because it's it's the inspiration for that, yes, but it's also its own standalone story of survival that's pretty amazing to me.
In the Heart of the Sea this Friday in theaters everywhere. It's rated PG-13. Thank you, Ron,
Thanks a
for
lot. Fun.
coming downstairs.
Fun.